Some promises break louder than words. Welcome back to Wives Gone Wild, where the unexpected always finds a way in. Where are you tuning in from? Let's dive in. I'm Lisa, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that love isn't always what it seems. Some people say betrayal is a slow burn, a whisper that turns into a scream. But sometimes, it hits like a wrecking ball. And tonight, we're talking about a love story that turned into something else entirely. Meet Chloe, a woman who had it all. A husband who adored her, a picture-perfect life, and a secret she thought would stay hidden. And then, there's Ellen, her husband. The man who saw the signs, played his cards right, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. It started like any other night. A dinner, a quiet restaurant, a simple lie. Just one little joke. Or at least, that's what Chloe thought. But when she picked up her phone and heard Ellen's voice on the other end, everything changed. "Darling," he said, his tone steady, almost too calm. "Where are you right now?" A bead of sweat formed at Chloe's temple, but she laughed it off. "I'm on a date." She paused, then added with a teasing lilt, "Just kidding, honey. I'm with my friends." A harmless joke, a light-hearted excuse. Except, this time, Ellen wasn't laughing. "Unfortunately, it's not a joke. Turn around, Chloe." And just like that, her world tilted. Sitting across the restaurant, hidden in the dim glow of candlelight, was her husband. Watching, waiting. A slow wave of his hand sent a chill down her spine. She had been caught, and the night was just getting started. The restaurant had the kind of atmosphere that invited secrets. Low lighting, the gentle hum of soft jazz, and the comforting murmur of quiet conversations. It was the kind of place where people could disappear, where a stolen glance or a hushed whisper could remain just that. Chloe sat by the window, her fingers tracing lazy circles on the rim of her wine glass. Outside, the city moved like a blur, people rushing past, unaware of the delicate game playing out inside. Across from her sat Joe, charming, confident, and just dangerous enough to make her heart race. Tonight felt different. Chloe had taken her time getting ready, making sure everything was perfect. A little more makeup, a dress that clung in all the right places, a second glance in the mirror before stepping out the door. She had convinced herself it was for her, that she just wanted to feel good, to enjoy a night out. But deep down, she knew. It wasn't just about the dinner or the conversation. It was about Joe. He smiled at her, that easy, effortless grin that made her stomach tighten. "You look stunning tonight," he murmured. She laughed softly, waving off the compliment, but the warmth in her cheeks betrayed her. "Do I?" she asked, her voice light, playful. "You always do." A ripple of something electric passed between them, unspoken, undeniable. Joe stood, brushing a hand over her shoulder as he leaned in. "Give me a minute," he said. "I need to hit the restroom." She nodded, watching as he disappeared toward the back of the restaurant. Alone for the first time that night, she exhaled, reaching for her phone. The dim glow of the screen reflected in her wine glass, a quiet distraction. Then it buzzed. Her husband's name lit up the screen. Her pulse kicked up. Why was he calling? He should have been at work. Busy, distracted, unaware of where she was. Chloe hesitated before answering, pasting on a practiced smile, even though he couldn't see her. "Yes, honey." Ellen's voice was steady, but there was something in it, something she couldn't quite place. "Darling, where are you right now?" A trickle of sweat formed at her temple. Her fingers tightened around the glass, but she forced out a light-hearted laugh. "I'm on a date," she teased, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Then, just as quickly, she softened her tone. "Just kidding, honey. I'm out with some friends from the conservatory." Silence. A beat too long. Then, his voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "Unfortunately, it's not a joke." Chloe's breath hitched. "Turn around." Her body stiffened. A strange, creeping cold spread through her chest as she slowly lifted her gaze. And there, in the far corner of the restaurant, bathed in the dim golden light, was Ellen, watching her, waiting. And just like that, the carefully built illusion shattered. Chloe's breath stalled in her throat. Ellen was here, sitting in the dim light, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. A slow, deliberate wave of his hand sent a cold shiver down her spine. Her fingers trembled around her phone. This wasn't happening. For a split second, she considered pretending she hadn't seen him. Maybe if she turned away, if she acted normal, this could all disappear. But the look in his eyes told her otherwise. There was no escaping this. She swallowed hard, pressing the phone closer to her ear, her voice barely a whisper. Ellen, why are you here? His response was calm, too calm. Change of plans. Thought I'd grab a bite. But imagine my surprise when I saw my own wife sitting here with some guy, looking cozy. A wave of heat rushed to her cheeks. Her mind scrambled for an excuse, for something, anything, that would explain this away. She forced out a laugh, though it sounded shaky even to her own ears. Wait, what? You think I'm on a date? That's ridiculous. She lifted her chin, trying to regain control. Besides, what about you? You're sitting with that woman over there. Ellen didn't even blink. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, lifting his glass with a slow, deliberate motion. That woman. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. That's Jessica, Chloe. My lawyer. Lawyer. The word hit like a punch to the stomach. Chloe's mind reeled, the conversation spiraling faster than she could grasp. Why was Ellen having dinner with a lawyer? She had been caught red-handed. But was he? Was he planning something? For the first time that night, genuine panic flared in her chest. No. She couldn't let him take control of the situation. Straightening her shoulders, she steeled herself, ignoring the tremor in her hands as she rose from her seat. If Ellen wanted to play mind games, fine. Two could play. With careful, measured steps, she crossed the restaurant, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The moment stretched unbearably as she approached his table. She could feel the eyes on her, the tension thick in the air. Finally, she reached them, sliding gracefully into the seat across from Ellen. She turned her gaze toward Jessica, offering a polite, controlled smile. Jessica, right? Jessica nodded, her expression poised, unreadable. Chloe turned back to Ellen, tilting her head slightly, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness. Honey, I have to ask, what's going on here? Why are you having dinner with a lawyer? She let the question hang, eyes locked onto his. Did something bad happen that I should know about? Ellen didn't answer right away. He studied her, his expression unreadable, before finally exhaling a quiet chuckle. Well, Chloe, he said, his voice slow, deliberate. I suppose you could say I'm in a rather unpleasant situation. He leaned back, his fingers tapping idly against the rim of his glass. It's kind of embarrassing, really. Chloe's stomach twisted. Where was he going with this? Ellen let the silence stretch just long enough before shaking his head, an almost amused smirk touching his lips. I never thought I'd be sitting here, talking to my lawyer. But here I am. He set his glass down, meeting her gaze with something sharp, something dangerous. You know, I just hope I'm not getting fitted for reindeer antlers this Christmas. His voice was calm, even, but the weight behind his words? It was crushing. And for the first time that night, Chloe felt the cold, creeping certainty of what was coming next. Chloe forced a smile, though the weight in her chest grew heavier by the second. Reindeer antlers. A polite, clever way of saying he knew. Her fingers curled against her lap, nails digging into her palm as she struggled to keep her composure. Ellen wasn't here for dinner. He was here for something far worse. But if he thought she was going to crumble, he was mistaken. She let out a soft, breathy laugh, tilting her head slightly as she turned to Jessica. What do you think, Jessica? A husband who secretly spies on his wife? Sounds a little paranoid, don't you think? Jessica's expression didn't waver. Her smile remained polite, practiced, but her eyes? They were sharp, watching, analyzing. Oh, trust me, she said smoothly, resting her hands on the table. Life has a way of surprising us. That's why I help couples through situations like these. A divorce lawyer. Chloe had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed sent a fresh wave of unease through her. She swallowed it down. Control the narrative. Flip the script. With a soft chuckle, she leaned back, lifting her wine glass with practiced ease. So a divorce lawyer, huh? She took a slow sip, letting the silence stretch before setting the glass down. Alan, I'd hate to see you jump to conclusions over something so innocent. She met his gaze head-on, her smile unwavering. It's just dinner. With an old friend. Ellen didn't react immediately. He simply took a sip from his own glass, his fingers tapping lightly against the stem before setting it down. Then, he leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, his expression still unreadable. That's so. Chloe nodded, keeping her tone light. Of course. Joe and I go way back. He's a brilliant pianist. We were just catching up. Ellen hummed, tilting his head slightly. A brilliant pianist, huh? His voice was calm, almost amused, and for some reason, that made her stomach twist. Chloe shrugged. Creative people like us, musicians, artists, we tend to be a little more expressive. But that's all it is. Just music. Just friends. Ellen chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. I suppose I should hope his hands stay on the piano keys then. Chloe forced another laugh, waving a dismissive hand. Jessica, you might want to note how your client here loves to provoke. Honestly, Alan, that kind of innuendo is beneath you. Jessica simply watched, her expression giving nothing away. But Ellen? His smile deepened. And that's when Chloe knew. He wasn't just provoking her. He had something. Her fingers tightened subtly around her glass as Ellen exhaled, almost like he was enjoying this. So, Chloe, he murmured, voice even deliberate. You're telling me that you and Joe are just friends? No. Intimate involvement. Chloe didn't blink. That's exactly what I'm telling you. She met his gaze, unwavering, daring him to challenge her. Unless, of course, Jessica here considers a love of music a reason to file for infidelity. She turned to Jessica, forcing a light laugh. Wouldn't that be ridiculous? Jessica smirked, shaking her head. Oh, I wouldn't go that far. Ellen let out a small, knowing chuckle. This whole thing was entertaining to him. Finally, he leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest. All right, honey, he said, amusement laced in his voice. But you know, I'd love to hear what Joe thinks of your friendly relationship. The confidence in Chloe's expression didn't falter. But inside, her stomach dropped. Because Joe wasn't here to defend her. And for the first time that night, she started to wonder, where the hell was he? Chloe kept her smile steady, but something inside her shifted. Where was Joe? She glanced toward the restroom, expecting to see him returning any second now. But the seconds stretched, and the silence at the table thickened. Ellen was watching her, his fingers tapping idly against his glass. Then, with an almost lazy motion, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Actually, Chloe, we don't need Joe here. Her breath hitched. Ellen's thumb hovered over the screen. He might show up eventually, but I thought you'd prefer to hear what he has to say right now. And then, he pressed play. A recording. A voice. Joe's voice. Chloe's stomach turned to stone as Joe's casual chuckle filled the space between them. You could say that. Joe's voice was relaxed, cocky. But what's it to you? Then Ellen's own voice. Low. Conversational. I've always been amazed at how easy some guys make it look to pick up women. Maybe you could give me some tips, huh? Joe laughed, unbothered. Oh, man, I don't know if you can teach it. Some of us just have it, you know. No. Chloe's hands curled into fists beneath the table. Not this. Ellen's voice came again, still calm, still playing along. Hey, so tell me. People say redheads are the hottest in bed. That true? Joe didn't even hesitate. Didn't pause. Didn't think. Oh, they're wild, all right. His voice held that same smug ease. That one. Man, she does things. If I'm not careful, she might break me. A cold wave of nausea rolled through Chloe's body. The recording kept going. Joe kept talking. She bounces like crazy. It was like the world had been turned inside out. Like the air had been sucked from the room. Chloe felt it. A heat creeping up her neck, a fire rising behind her ribs. Then, silence. And in that silence, Ellen took a slow sip of his drink before setting the glass down with a quiet clink against the table. Wow, he mused, as if genuinely impressed. Lucky you, huh? Joe laughed in the recording. Lucky? I'd say so. Just hoping she doesn't wear me out tonight. Then, the final blow, Ellen's voice again. Good luck with that, man. The recording ended. The restaurant's gentle hum of conversation and clinking silverware felt distant, background noise to the sheer, suffocating silence at their table. Jessica exhaled through her nose, her lips pressing together as she glanced at Chloe, assessing her, calculating. Ellen, he just watched, waiting for her to say something. Chloe forced a breath through her nose, straightening in her seat, reaching for her glass with fingers that only slightly trembled. She could fix this. She had to. She took a slow sip, set the glass down, and lifted her chin. Well, Alan, she said lightly, her voice smooth, controlled. I think Joe was just, showing off. Ellen raised an eyebrow. Showing off. Chloe shrugged, letting out a soft, breathy laugh. Men say all kinds of things when they think they're bonding with other guys. He's clearly just joking around. Ellen let a bead of silence stretch. Then, his lips twitched. Joking, huh? His fingers tapped idly against the table. Sounded pretty detailed for a joke. Chloe exhaled through her nose, keeping her expression steady. You know Joe? He's a braggart. Loves to exaggerate. Honestly, the guy's got a wild imagination. She turned to Jessica, hoping for an ally. Jessica, come on. Can we really take the word of some idiot who talks like that seriously? He probably thought he was being funny. Jessica's expression didn't soften. If anything, she looked mildly amused. Oh, I think I've seen enough for one night. She turned to Ellen, nodding toward the exit. Thank you for inviting me. This was eye-opening. Chloe's stomach clenched. And then, a movement near the restroom. She turned just in time to see Joe emerging, scanning the restaurant, looking around with a mix of confusion and frustration. Ellen smirked, tilting his head. Oh, look, your friend is back. Chloe's fingers curled against the table as Joe spotted her, his brows drawing together. He moved quickly toward them, his expression shifting from confusion to frustration as he reached the table. Without even noticing Ellen or Jessica, he blurted out, Chloe, you won't believe it. Some idiot propped the restroom door shut. Had me stuck in there forever. Then he glanced at Ellen. His eyes narrowed slightly. It was you, wasn't it? Ellen just smiled. And for the first time all night, Joe realized he was in deep, deep trouble. Joe's frustration was clear as he glared at Ellen, his fists clenching at his sides. It was you, wasn't it? His voice was sharp, indignant, like a man who had just realized he was playing a game he wasn't prepared for. Ellen didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his smirk widening just enough to be infuriating. You were in there a while, Joe? Hope it gave you some time to reflect. Joe's jaw tightened, his eyes darting between Ellen and Chloe. What the hell is this? Chloe knew that Joe hadn't pieced it all together yet. He didn't realize just how badly the situation had turned against him. But Ellen did. And so did Jessica. Chloe forced a quick smile, hoping, praying, that she could regain some control. Joe, she said smoothly, placing a hand lightly on his arm. This is my husband, Ellen. The blood drained from Joe's face. He stiffened, his whole body going rigid as reality slammed into him. Ellen tilted his head, watching the panic unfold in real time. You were about to explain to me how you and my wife are just friends, right? Joe blinked, swallowed. His hands twitched slightly at his sides. He was scrambling, searching for an escape. And then, he made his move. Oh, crap. The words stumbled out of his mouth, his eyes wide, darting toward the exit. I think I just heard my phone ringing. Better go check on that. Without another word, he pivoted and bolted. The restaurant went quiet for a moment as Joe practically sprinted back to his table, grabbed his jacket, and all but ran out the door without so much as a glance back. Chloe sat frozen, her eyes locked on the spot Joe had just occupied. He left. He actually left her. Her face twisted between shock and rage, but she swallowed it down. She had to. She turned back to Ellen, forcing her best composed, unbothered expression. Well, that was dramatic. Ellen didn't say anything at first. He simply reached for his glass, took a slow sip, and exhaled like a man who had just won. Then, with an almost lazy motion, he leaned in slightly. Chloe, looks like Joe might be a decent lover, but he's a terrible friend. She gritted her teeth, her nails digging into her palm beneath the table. Ellen smirked, glancing toward Jessica. Anyway, I think it's about time to pay up and head out. Jessica gave a small nod, rising from her chair and gathering her things. Chloe's heart thumped against her ribs. Something about the way Ellen said that made her stomach churn. She watched as he stood, casually adjusting his jacket before glancing back at her one last time. Then, with a knowing smile, he said, "Oh, and honey, you'll be covering dinner with Joe out of your own pocket." Her stomach dropped. Chloe's fingers instinctively reached for her purse, her mind already racing as she pulled out her card. He wouldn't. He couldn't. She called over the waiter, handing him her card with a forced, confident nod. "Please, just let this go through." The waiter swiped, paused, frowned. Then, shaking his head, he turned back to her. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your card isn't working." Chloe's blood ran cold. Slowly, she lifted her gaze back to Ellen. He was already walking toward the exit with Jessica, but at the sound of her voice, tight, laced with barely contained fury. He stopped. Ellen, she seethed. Did you do this? He turned just slightly, giving her an almost sympathetic smile. I didn't realize it would be an issue, Chloe. His voice was light, casual. I just figured your friend would take care of it. Chloe's pulse pounded in her ears. Damn it, Ellen. Her voice dropped to a low hiss. You're really going to leave me here like this? Ellen's smirk deepened. Come on, Chloe. His gaze flicked down to her, his eyes cold. You're a resourceful woman. I'm sure you'll figure something out. And with that, he turned and walked out, Jessica beside him, leaving Chloe behind. Chloe sat frozen, her pulse hammering against her ribs as the waiter hovered beside her, his polite yet firm expression making her stomach sink deeper. Her card wasn't working, and Ellen, that bastard, had just walked out the door, leaving her stranded with a bill she never intended to pay. She inhaled sharply, schooling her expression into something composed, something controlled. This wasn't happening. She wasn't about to sit here and let herself look weak. Lifting her chin, she forced an easy smile at the waiter. There must be some mistake. Try it again. The waiter nodded and swiped the card once more. The machine beeped. Declined. Chloe's fingers clenched around her purse strap. No, not here. Not like this. She swallowed, forcing out a light laugh as she reached into her bag. Oh, you know how these cards are. Always acting up when you least expect it. The waiter's expression didn't change. Do you have another form of payment, ma'am? Her heart clenched. No, she didn't. Ellen had made damn sure of that. Slowly, Chloe glanced toward the exit, half expecting, half hoping, that he might come back. But of course, he wouldn't. He had already won. Taking a breath, she straightened her shoulders and gave the waiter her most charming smile. I just need to make a quick call. She turned away before he could respond, her fingers already flying across her phone screen. Emma, her best friend, her safety net. The only person who could get her out of this mess without a scene. The line rang once, twice. Then, hey babe, what's up? Chloe exhaled sharply, lowering her voice. Emma, I need a favor. There was a pause on the other end. Then, oh no. What happened? Chloe's jaw tightened. I'll explain later. Just, can you come to Maison Rouge? Like now. Emma didn't hesitate. On my way. Chloe ended the call and turned back to the waiter with a tight-lipped smile. My friend is coming. She'll take care of it. The waiter nodded but didn't move away. He wasn't going to let her off that easy. She sat back in her chair, crossing her legs, keeping her expression calm even as rage boiled beneath her skin. Ellen thought he could humiliate her, thought he could pull the rug out from under her and just walk away. Fine. He wanted to play dirty? She could play dirty too. 15 minutes later, Emma swept into the restaurant, her heels clicking against the polished floors. She spotted Chloe immediately and rushed over, her brows knitted in concern. What the hell happened? She whispered. Chloe sighed dramatically, pressing a hand to her forehead. Ellen, he canceled my card, just to humiliate me. Emma's eyes widened. Oh, that son of a... The waiter cleared his throat. Emma huffed, pulling out her own card and handing it over. The transaction went through without a hitch, and the moment they stepped outside, Emma whirled on her. Start talking. Now. Chloe shook her head, gripping her purse strap. Not here. Let's go. She needed a drink. A plan. A way to fix this. Because if Ellen thought this was over, he was dead wrong. The front door slammed behind her. Chloe stormed into the house, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, fury tightening every muscle in her body. She dropped her purse onto the console table with a thud, barely registering the sound. Ellen, she called, her voice sharp, slicing through the stillness of the house. Silence. Her breath came fast, her heart hammering as she scanned the dimly lit living room. Then, movement. Ellen appeared from the hallway, calm as ever, a small duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Packing. Her stomach twisted. What the hell was that? Chloe demanded, taking a step toward him. You set me up, you embarrassed me in public, and then you just leave? Ellen exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly as he zipped up the bag. You did that to yourself, Chloe. She let out a bitter laugh. Oh, come on. Don't act like you're some innocent victim here. His eyes finally met hers, steady and cold. I didn't cheat on my spouse. The words hit like a slap, but she refused to let it show. Instead, she crossed her arms, forcing a smirk onto her lips. Oh, please. Are you really throwing all of this away over one stupid dinner? Ellen's jaw tightened. He let out a slow breath, like he was forcing himself to remain composed. It was never about dinner, Chloe. Her throat went dry. He took a step forward, closing the distance between them, his voice lower now. It was about trust, about respect, about the fact that the person I married, the woman I built a life with, looked me in the eye and lied. Her nails dug into her arms. No, he wasn't going to flip this on her. So what? She shot back, tilting her chin up. You drag your lawyer into this? You humiliate me? You think that makes you the better person? Ellen's expression didn't change. No, Chloe, but it makes me the smarter one. A sharp silence filled the space between them. She hated that he looked so composed, so in control, like none of this was affecting him. Her gaze flicked to the bag in his hand. He was leaving. For the first time, real panic slid beneath her skin. Where are you going? She asked, her voice quieter now. Ellen didn't hesitate. My brother's. Just for a few days. Her fingers curled into fists. So that's it, she snapped. You're running away? He let out a humorless chuckle. No, Chloe. He adjusted the strap of his bag over his shoulder. I'm walking away. Her chest tightened. She wanted to scream at him, to make him stay. Instead, she forced a bitter laugh, narrowing her eyes. You really think you can just leave me? Ellen gave her a long, measured look. Then he smiled. Watch me. And with that, he turned, walked out the door, and left her standing in the empty house. The silence in the house was suffocating. Chloe stood motionless, her pulse hammering as the front door clicked shut behind Ellen. He was gone. No. Her jaw clenched, rage bubbling beneath the surface. He thought he could just walk away, leave her like this, humiliate her, make her look like the villain, and then vanish? Not a chance. Chloe wasn't the kind of woman who lost. With a sharp inhale, she grabbed her purse, yanking it open and pulling out her phone. Her fingers flew over the screen as she scrolled through her contacts, searching for the one person who could help her turn this around. Mark Reynolds, divorce attorney. She hit call. The line rang twice before his smooth, practiced voice filled her ear. Chloe? Didn't expect to hear from you so soon. Her grip tightened around the phone. I need your help. A pause. Then, a knowing chuckle. Ellen finally made his move. Huh? Chloe exhaled sharply, pacing the length of the living room. He blindsided me, Mark. Brought his lawyer to dinner, set me up in front of her, canceled my damn credit cards. He's trying to paint me as the bad guy. Well, Chloe, Mark said, his tone easy but edged with amusement. That's because, technically, you are. She stopped pacing, her nails digging into her palm. That's not the point. Mark sighed. Okay. Tell me what you want. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I want to win. Another chuckle. That's vague, sweetheart. What's the angle? She took a breath, gathering her thoughts. Ellen's building a case. He's got a lawyer, Jessica. She saw everything at the restaurant. But I can turn this around. Mark hummed thoughtfully. How? Chloe sat down, her mind already racing through the possibilities. Simple. Ellen overreacted. He's a jealous, controlling husband who's looking for an excuse to punish me. All I did was have dinner with an old friend, and now he's blowing it out of proportion. So, gaslighting. Bold strategy. Not gaslighting. Chloe corrected sharply. Just reframing the narrative. A pause. Then, I like it. Her shoulders eased slightly. Mark's voice turned serious. Listen, if this goes to court, we need to be prepared. Do you have anything on Ellen? Chloe frowned. Like what? Anything that makes him look bad. Messages, bank statements, late-night absences. If we can shift the blame onto him, we gain leverage. Chloe's mind spun. Ellen was calculated, but he wasn't perfect. Maybe she just needed to look harder. I'll find something, she promised. Mark chuckled. That's the spirit. Let's set up a meeting for tomorrow. We'll start prepping. Chloe nodded to herself, her heartbeat steadying. Ellen thought he had her cornered. Thought he could just walk away and win. But Chloe never lost. And this time, she'd make damn sure of it. The day of the hearing arrived faster than Chloe expected. She stood outside the courthouse, adjusting the sleek blazer that Mark had insisted she wear. Optics matter, he had told her. You need to look like the victim here. She had spent the past week perfecting her story, practicing every word, every subtle shift in tone, every carefully chosen expression. If Ellen wanted to drag her through the mud, fine. She'd make sure he looked just as dirty. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, and the door swung open. Ellen stepped out, exuding his usual calm control, wearing a tailored suit that screamed quiet confidence. And beside him, Jessica. Chloe's stomach twisted. That woman. She had been there. She had seen everything. And now she was here to tear Chloe apart. Mark noticed Chloe's stiff posture and leaned in, voice low. Relax. We stick to the plan. She nodded, inhaling deeply as they strode toward the entrance. This wasn't just about saving face anymore. It was war. Inside the courtroom, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Ellen sat across from her, completely unbothered. Jessica's legal pad was already open, her pen poised like a weapon. Chloe could almost hear her calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The judge's voice echoed through the room. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, we are here today to discuss the terms of your divorce proceedings. Chloe folded her hands neatly in her lap, making sure to appear composed, even wounded. Ellen, on the other hand, he didn't need to act. He simply sat there, his expression calm, his body language unreadable. Mark began his opening statement, laying the foundation of their defense. Your Honor, my client has been unfairly vilified by her husband, who has taken extreme measures to humiliate her publicly. This is a case of overreaction, of a jealous man jumping to conclusions based on nothing more than assumptions. Jessica didn't even blink. She was waiting. And then, finally, she moved. Rising smoothly from her chair, she approached the judge's bench. Your Honor, while my colleague paints a picture of innocence, I'd like to present some evidence that may shed a different light on Mrs. Carter's friendship with Mr. Joseph Parker. A file appeared in her hands, thick with printed screenshots. Chloe's stomach dropped. Jessica turned, handing a copy to the judge, then slid one across the table directly in front of Chloe. Messages. Her own words. Intimate, damning, undeniable. Ellen had them. All of them. And Chloe knew, before she had even spoken a word, she had already lost. Chloe's fingers tightened around the stack of printed messages in front of her. Her messages. Flirty, intimate, undeniable. The courtroom felt smaller, the air heavier. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to remain composed. This wasn't over. Not yet. She lifted her gaze, locking eyes with Ellen. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't smirking. He just looked done. Jessica's voice cut through the silence. These messages clearly indicate that Mrs. Carter's relationship with Mr. Parker was more than just a friendship. Mark, ever the professional, leaned forward. Your Honor, text messages don't prove anything beyond casual conversation. People exaggerate, joke. Jessica was already shaking her head. There's more. Chloe's stomach twisted. Jessica turned slightly and gestured toward the back of the room. A door opened, and then he walked in. Their neighbor, a retired man from across the street, one Chloe had barely exchanged more than pleasantries with. She felt her throat tighten. Why was he here? Jessica didn't waste a second. Mr. Reynolds, can you confirm what you witnessed on the night of September 14th? The old man cleared his throat, shifting slightly before speaking. Yeah, I saw a young man, dark hair, about 6 feet tall, entering the Carter house around 9 p.m. He left early the next morning. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Chloe's nails dug into her palms. Ellen didn't move. Jessica pressed on. And you are certain this was Mr. Parker? The man nodded. Same guy? I saw him before, picking her up once or twice. No, this wasn't happening. She turned to Mark, waiting for a rebuttal, but even he looked momentarily thrown off. Jessica's voice remained steady. So, we have digital evidence, eyewitness testimony, and she slid another document across the table. Chloe's pulse pounded. Bank statements, charges from a hotel, dinners, an expensive gift purchase, all lining up perfectly with dates she had told Ellen she was out with friends. He had everything, and she had nothing. The weight of it crashed over her like a tidal wave. This wasn't a battle. It was a massacre, and Ellen Carter had just won. The courtroom emptied around her, but Chloe sat frozen. The judge's ruling had been swift, brutal, and final. Ellen had won. Mark was already packing up their case files, but his silence said everything. There was nothing left to fight for. Chloe's hands trembled as she reached for her purse, her mind racing. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. Ellen was walking toward the exit, Jessica beside him. His posture was relaxed, but Chloe could feel it, the weight of finality in his steps. Panic clawed up her throat. No, not like this. Without thinking, she stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Ellen. He stopped. Slowly, he turned back, his expression unreadable. Jessica raised an eyebrow but didn't speak. Chloe stepped forward, her voice softer than it had been in weeks. "Can we talk?" Ellen exhaled, shifting his bag over his shoulder. "We just did, Chloe." Her fingers curled into fists. "Not in there. Here. Just us." Jessica glanced at Ellen, waiting for his response, but he only sighed, nodding once. Jessica took the hint. "I'll be outside." She walked past Chloe without a glance. And now, they were alone. Chloe inhaled sharply, forcing the lump down her throat. "Ellen, we don't have to end things like this." His jaw tensed. "You think this isn't already over?" She hated how distant his voice sounded, like she was a stranger. She shook her head quickly. "I made mistakes." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. "But we had something real, Ellen. Something special." He didn't react, didn't soften, didn't break. Instead, he studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he spoke. "No, Chloe." His voice was quiet, but firm. "Final. You didn't just make mistakes." Her breath hitched. "You lied." A lump formed in her throat, but she refused to look away. Ellen exhaled, running a hand over his jaw before shaking his head. And the worst part, his eyes locked onto hers. "Even now, you're still trying to twist this into something it's not." Chloe's stomach hollowed. This was it. She had lost him. For good. Ellen stepped back, his gaze lingering for only a moment before he turned. And this time, he didn't stop. Chloe watched him walk away, her chest tightening with every step. She had played her game, and in the end, she had lost everything. Some betrayals come softly, creeping in like a whisper. Others, they explode. And tonight, you just witnessed one of the loudest. Chloe had it all, a husband who trusted her, a life built on stability. But when trust cracks, when lies slip through the seams, there's no glue strong enough to hold it together. She thought she could outplay him, thought she could control the narrative. But in the end, the truth had a way of speaking louder than any excuse. And Ellen? He didn't scream. He didn't lash out. He simply walked away. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest answer of all. But now let's turn it to you. What do you think? Would you have forgiven Chloe? Or did Ellen do exactly what needed to be done? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your take on this. And if you love stories that push the boundaries of loyalty, betrayal, and the choices we make sure you subscribe. Because here at Wives Gone Wild, one thing is certain. The truth is always messier than the lie. Until next time, stay wild.